So, it's time. Time to design your own project. Finally, you get to work on what you want to. Finally, it's up to you. Only, now what? How do I do this? I need an adult! Personal projects are an excellent way to propel yourself forward artistically. In the last video, we discussed why this is, and here we will be going over how to actually design the projects in a manner that is constructive and healthy. If you are enjoying these videos, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps a ton. My name is Zack. Let's dive in. As I tried to sort through all of the thoughts and ideas around designing projects over the course of the last decade, I've really come down to three central components of the process: the scaffolding of the project, new skills to develop, and old skills to hone. These three don't have a definitive starting point, as any of them can be the genesis of a project, but these three seem to be interconnected and incredibly important in the process of defining a project of significance. As a teacher, I often started with which new skills I wanted my students to learn. But even as I am saying this, my inner dialogue is whispering in my ear, yes, but you also frequently had Part 2 lessons specifically designed to work on skills taught in the past. So let's go over what each of these components look like and some quick examples of how you could design a project based on each of them. The first category is the scaffolding of the project. This is the architecture of your piece, the visible form it takes. This is what happens when you see an awesome drawing on Instagram and go, oh man, I need to make my version of that. It is not particularly linked to anything other than idea and beauty. When you think about the scaffolding of a project, you are really thinking about the concept and what it will look like once it's completed. Starting a project from this point is perhaps the most innate to us. It is less academic in its nature and more exciting. I do this frequently with my own personal projects. I just finished working on an illustration of a city floating inside a volcano. The concept for the piece wasn't based on the skills I had ahead of time, nor was it based on the skills I wished to develop. It was based on my desire to see something come into reality. As I planned and put the project together, I did design those components too. I figured out what I had in my skill box and what I could bring to the table and what things I wanted to work on. I wanted to focus on learning how to put a more interesting composition together, and I wanted to improve my handling of stone and mountain. This was followed then by a series of thumbnails until I landed on one that I liked. And then I found maybe 24 references for stone, architecture, volcanoes, stormy skies, and similar lighting conditions. In the end, I focused on several skills I wanted to work on, and I developed and honed some skills I already possessed. But the project itself was based on the idea alone, the concept, and that was enough to get me excited and pull me through the project. So basic steps for designing a project from concept. Choose your scaffolding. The architecture of your project. What will it be, and what will it visually look like? Choose the skills that you don't have right now and you want to work on. Make sure they are present, but take up a small portion of the overall project so as not to overwhelm yourself. Choose some skills you have already developed, things you are more comfortable with, and make sure they are incorporated. Sketch, thumbnail, research, and prep, and then give yourself a timeline within which to execute. You will be making beautiful things in no time. The second category of project design is projects built specifically to learn and develop new skills. I think it is always wise to have a list of skills you want to develop, things that you want to learn how to do. If you do not already possess a list, I would encourage you to sit down and write out 5 things you would like to learn how to do artistically, and then follow that up with 5 things that you do well now. It's good to balance things out with some positivity. A project designed specifically to learn a new skill can often be more rudimentary than the other two categories, as you're starting with something new, and it is good to avoid being overwhelmed. In my lessons on perspective, where students were presumably being introduced to 1- and 2-point perspective drawing for the first time, the projects had to be simple at first. The rules and the minutiae of the drawing style can be quite overwhelming, so designing projects that worked on only a few skills at a time was paramount to the student's success. The first 1-point perspective project was often something as simple as a small town containing a set amount of objects, buildings, roads, and signs. A simple ordeal, but very focused. Students would learn the fundamentals through several days of practice preceding the project, and then would spend several more days putting all of it together to create a little townscape in the Old West, maybe even with a stereotypical tumbleweed cascading down the center of town. Perhaps you, like me, want to develop the ability to draw creatures from imagination. That is a skill that I do not quite possess at the moment, and so in designing a little project to do so, I can isolate a particular animal, perhaps a carnivorous dinosaur. My goal is to be able to draw a carnivorous dinosaur without reference from imagination in a reasonable amount of time, maybe 1 to 2 hours, let's say. When I embark on the project, I don't just dive in. Like my students did, I spend several batches of time practicing dinosaurs from reference, specifically looking at how body segments interact, what shape the eyes are, how far they are from the top of the head, and do all the teeth curve backwards. I study based on reference before finally sitting down to work on my mini project. You can see how this looks quite a bit different from basing a project off of the scaffolding concept. This method will likely develop your skills more quickly, but it may feel a little less rewarding, as you are incorporating fewer skills that you have already put time into. The basic steps for developing a project to learn new skills. Determine which very specific skill you are going to work on. Be quite specific. Not perspective, 2-point perspective. Not anatomy, upper arm anatomy. The world is too large to be unfocused in this manner of project. Design a very specific mini project to work on that skill. Think of the little town or my drawing of a dinosaur. Keep it simple and focused. Research and practice prior to execution. This is key for a new skill-based project, as you don't really have the ability to just dive in. There are skills you will need to practice before starting, and that is totally normal. Look up some YouTube videos that pertain to this particular skill. There are loads of lovely helpful videos on composition, anatomy, creature design, you name it. They will help you get started with practice before diving in. Give yourself a timeline and keep it reasonable and short. As a rule of thumb, I would say less than 5 hours of practice and less than 5 hours of execution. Maybe that sounds like a lot, but it might amount to 2 hours of practice and 3 hours of execution on your mini project. 5 hours is not that much. You can do it. The final category of project design is projects built to hone an existing skill. This may seem somewhat in between the previous two categories, and perhaps it is. It requires some prior knowledge, and because of that, it allows for more adventure, without it being driven entirely by that adventure. This could obviously be a direct follow-up to the previous category as well, diving back into a skill that you were just starting to learn. For me, this is frequently how I approach skills that I haven't looked at in a long time, mostly just due to me trying to do too many things. When I go to get back into a medium or subject matter I haven't touched in several months, this is usually how I do it. The odd part is, these projects can often look exactly like those devised entirely from concept, but you as the artist will know what the purpose was, what you were trying to obtain through the process. Many of my pen and ink pieces are projects in this vein. I feel pretty comfortable with the medium, so I can design a project that allows me to work on more particular skills, such as directional crosshatching or illustrating the differences between the texture of stone and organic material. These are specific things to focus on, too specific for a piece designing around concept and are too involved for a new skill. These projects are often more relaxing than the other two arenas, as they are likely starting in an area of comfort and they are not largely theoretical or conceptual. If we go back to perspective for a moment, when I took my students into the units on 2-point perspective, they had already been working on perspective in general for some time. We would go through the same sets of practice assignments before arriving at the 2-point perspective project, a project designed to hone their now slightly developed perspective skills. Because the students had some ability in this arena, the project was no longer as simple as the little western town might have been. It was open-ended. Create some human structure in 2-point perspective. Some of these were awesome: castles, farms, cities, Death Stars, and miniature worlds. This idea was specifically developed for the students to further hone their perspective drawing skills, not to learn something new, and not as a free exploration. They knew the boundaries of the sandbox and could simply play inside it. Maybe that's the best way to think about projects built to hone skills. They are just well-defined sandboxes. How do we build a project like this then? Firstly, determine skill to focus on. You can be less specific here than earlier as you have some footing. There's nothing wrong with being specific though. Pick something as your project topic that is slightly beyond what you have done in the past. Spend a lot of time with 2-point perspective? Try 3. Done a lot of figural work? Do some with some extreme foreshortening. Don't stray too far from what you know and do, just a little outside of that. This is how you develop skills. Sketch, thumbnail, research, and prep, and then give yourself a timeline within which to execute. And start. This is likely the least stressful of all of these categories. This was 3 different ways to approach designing and building a project of your own, based on your individual desires and goals. I hope this was helpful, and please let me know in the comments down below which of these you gravitate toward, and of course, let me know if you have any others. I would love to hear from you. I am but one man and have missed many things, I am sure, and I would love your help getting a pulse on what I missed. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.